Leesburg City Commission Budget Workshop for Tuesday, July the 11th at 5:30. If you'll stand for the invocation and pledge. Lord, please bless everyone here tonight. Keep us all healthy and safe. In your name we pray. Amen. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item on the agenda, which is the only item on the agenda, is presentations, and I'll turn that over to our city manager.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Cannell. So part 2 of the fiscal year 24 budget workshops. On Thursday, we covered the general fund in depth. This evening, we're going to hit a couple of the enterprise funds, the special revenue funds, and that was it. But debt service, yeah, debt service, kind of boring and redundant. I changed up when we did the initial stuff. You know, this isn't set in stone, but I just changed the order this evening. I wanted to hit the enterprise funds first, the 2 of them that we will hit, electric and gas, just to kind of get those out of the way, because I think there's probably going to be some discussion on some of the special revenue items. And frankly, I wanted to hit you with the electric fund right out of the gate, because it's of a $213 million budget. The electric fund is $90 million, so it's about 40%. And so of this big giant book that everybody reviews every year, which is like 357 pages, 40% of it is about 10 pages. And then on page 266, there's one number, which is $57,746 million. That one number is 25% of the whole book. So obviously electric has a lot to do with what we're at. So we're going to hit electric gas, then we'll get to the special revenue funds. So we kind of hit those proprietary electric gas building, then we'll get to the CRAs, hit the discretionary sales tax, and then we kind of wind it down real quick with the gas tax, the housing assistance program, and the debt service accounts. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to jump right into the electric fund. I wanted to start with this picture. I'm kind of going to throw the kitchen sink at you as far as some broad parameters, the electric fund, pluses and minuses as I see it and staff sees it over the course of, say, the last 18 months, where we've been, where we're going. So I kind of, again, wanted to throw the whole kitchen sink at you and then break it down into the questions and answers and the budget in general. So the electric department, the electric fund budget, it's just a little bit short of $90 million. So $89,495,843. So that again makes up about 45% of the entire budget. Of that number, the big giant thing that sticks out is the wholesale power supply, $57 million this year, almost 58 that we estimate. That's up, so we've gone down, we've gone up, and now we're coming back down. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but that's 65% of the entire electric fund. The electric fund then breaks down to several other components. So personnel and operating are the next big expenditures. Personnel about $5.4 million, operating. So that's the meters we buy, the wires we buy, the poles we buy. If you're in one of our incentive programs where we help defray costs to buy water heaters, that's like, I think that cost in there was like 60 grand in one of the divisions. All those would be considered operating supplies. Transfers, not to confuse you, $5 million. That's made up kind of 2 things in there. We talked about it a little bit on Thursday. About $3 million of that 5.3 is the famous transfer. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then the other $2 million of the 5.3 is the surcharge. So I lumped those together, and there's a couple other little numbers in there. But the transfer number is the 6% transfer and the surcharge. Allocations are all the other charges that get charged out. So all our enterprise funds have an allocation or a contra. So they pay a proportionate share of all those general services. So the fleet, legal, IT, all those other expenses that are synonymous with enterprise funds, they're housed in the general fund, but their share is paid by a proportion of who uses it. So we have a formula and a breakdown of X percent of customer services time is spent on electric, gas, water, sewer. Then that cost is divided amongst that. So electric's cost allocation for all those general services, it's a pretty big number. So that's about $6 million. So if the city of Leesburg per se was a co-op, they'd be spending $6 million on legal fees, on general management, on fleet costs, all those type of things. So that's a real cost, and we can back that up. Depreciation, we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. That number's actually down, but the way that we have the budget figured is that the depreciation cost this year is actually going to be a direct cash injection into the cash position of the electric fund, which we're going to talk about in a second. Capital, $2.9 million, is down significantly. We need to talk about that in some detail. And then the debt is about 4% at 3.7. So, there's those 6, 7, 8 other categories, but again, the lion's share everything we do in the electric fund is the wholesale power supply. So first, the sob story. The electric fund has typically maintained a very solid cash position, up here in the neighborhood of $20 million. But it's been hit in the last couple of years with some significant issues that has made that graph gone down. Some of our doing, most of not our doing. So the first thing is wholesale power supply. We're going to talk about that in the next cell. Obviously, that thing's gone up and down. In the good years, we're paying about $70 a megawatt. Last year, or finishing off this year, we're going to be an average of 101. We thought that number was going to be $120 a megawatt. And then next year, because we have full stabilization in there with some of the things that FMPA has done with hedging, we're estimating somewhere around the $91 a megawatt hour. So that we'll talk, if we can get into those details, I'll be brief here. But essentially, that is directly correlated to where the power cost adjustment's been. I'll get into that in a little bit. But wholesale is gone up and down because of basically two things. I know everybody kind of scoffs, I think, when you say the war in the Ukraine has had an effect on our gas supply. It has. It has because that was a Bitey slip, right? I said Soviet Union. Listen, I didn't say Iraq or the wrong country, but Russia is in Eurasia is a significant supplier of natural gas to Western Europe. So when the war with Ukraine broke out, the embargo and that stopping of natural gas shifted supply and demand. So American natural gas got shipped over to Western Europe because the NATO countries aren't buying that Russian natural gas. That's significant. There's also the green energy debate that goes on and shifting from fossil fuels. So those two things have led to supply changes, to stopping pipeline policies, to shipping natural gas wherever, and that has driven our costs up. We were saved this year, as we talked about a lot, by the FMPA's hedging policies and the warmer than expected winter. Next year, or this coming fiscal year, we feel good that hopefully that price will be capped because of the hedges. That program lasts 18 months, so we're going to get this full fiscal year and then 6 months more in fiscal year 25 before it would potentially get volatile again, but 18 months obviously is a lot of time. So wholesale costs, significant impact in how we're managing the electric fund. Inflation has been significant in electric, from meter cost increases, pole cost increases, wire cost increases. They buy expensive stuff, so inflation has hit the operating numbers. That's a big deal. Supply chain is another big one. We have got to the point to where we started buying materials in advance because we need to constantly change out meters. If we don't have accurate meters, we're not counting some energy that goes through. You don't count energy correctly, you lose money. So we have increased our inventory supplies. That has had an impact on that chart. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. We have been also extremely aggressive with our system improvements, kind of in two ways. The first way is changing out things to improve our system, changing out feeder systems, changing out old copper wire, changing out poles, and just basically improving our system because it needs some, focus in areas. For example, like when we changed out the transformers to other systems where we anticipated growth and we knew we had some feeder legs that needed to be upgraded before the growth came in, which is kind of the next issue of we identified areas in the system that needed improvement to support growth, and in some of those cases the growth hasn't come, so we put some money into, or it hasn't come yet. And that's the good part of the story, is it hasn't come yet. We're hopeful that stuff is going to come. There have been a lot of system improvements in Fruitland Park growth, a lot of system improvements up the 44 corridor, where now we're just starting to see that growth. So we've put money into the ground and haven't spent a lot of meters. So once those meters, the spring is set, so once we start seeing those growth things happen, will recoup these costs, but it's had an effect on us, and it needs to guide us moving forward. So those are the influencing factors on where we're at. So let me kind of drill down into them a little bit. I wanted to give you a little bit of a history on power costs because it's such a big component of the electric fund. So I went back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fiscal years to fiscal year 20, and I'm just going to deal with these bottom line numbers, and all these go in. So we paid about $35.7 million in fiscal year 20 for power. And our consumption, we've seen about 3% growth-ish. So nothing crazy. It's actually kind of good, steady growth in the electric side of the house. So $35 million, that broke down to a usage of 70, I think that says 70.89 a kilowatt. Good number. You know, when the cost was that way, you saw our cost probably hanging out somewhere between $105 a kilowatt to $117. That first 1,000 I'm referencing in those numbers. So when we're paying $70 in that ballpark, so 20 was 70, 21 was 74. Those are good numbers. You see the rate staying down in the 117s. A couple times we were down with no power cost adjustment, but we had a good competitive rate. There were a couple times when we were the best rate in the all requirements project at FMPA. Then we got whacked in 22. And so we circled this so you can just see. So we went from, $37 million to $56 million. So almost a $20 million increase pretty much overnight. You see how the monthly expenses doubled. So when folks are talking about their power bills going up, our power went up the same. Where we got into trouble was we were slow to react. Again, I think that falls on my desk, but we kept the rate as low as we could until we saw that power cost adjustment go down, and we needed that to come up. So in September, we implemented the 7-cent power cost, 7 cents per kilowatt sales into the power. So that got our bill up to that 177 number. By April, some of the mitigatory things came in. We had the mild winter. And as of today, we got the June numbers in. We are now in the black on the power cost adjustment number. Last month, I reported to you that we had a really great over-recovery month. In June, we had another good over-recovery month, and so we're sitting at about $500,000 in the black on the power cost adjustment account. We want that to sit at $3 million, but now is the time where we could decrease that power cost adjustment, which you'll see in July. You'll see that your power cost adjustment number go down 3 cents. So that's a good thing. So as you use more energy, your power cost adjustment will be lower, so you won't see that type of bill that you saw last summer. And then we think moving out into, so we had horrible, we got better than we estimated, but still, so we go from $75 to $110 to 101, and then we think for the next 18 months we'll probably balance out around 90. So 90 is not as good as 70, and so where you'll see that is the rate where we're headed. I'm going to jump ahead here. The rate where we're headed, we were up here, ugly, one of the worst rates in the state. in a couple of weeks after we get through some stuff, I'm probably going to roll this out and crunch it out and spread it out, because while we look ugly, if you look at the FMEA reports right now, I think if you average that out and compare it over the 18 months where the power cost adjustment was super high, you'll see that over the life of a 24 span, you'll see that our rate is back. Because what you're going to see now come in your July bills is we'll be down at 137, which is as close as we've ever been to FPL. Mount Dora is the only other regional competitor who will be a little bit cheaper, but will be significantly less expensive than Duke and will be a little bit less expensive than Seco. So while that's good, that I think we'll probably be hanging out in this 137 per thousand residential rate probably for a little while, but that's still $20 more than where we were before the world went crazy. So we'll just have to manage that. And unfortunately, the report is 137 is going to be a good rate for the foreseeable future. And then again here, this is the chart here that kind of shows those power cost numbers we already talked about. Transfer is another significant issue. We want to mitigate the amount of money that we transfer out of the general fund, out of the electric fund, into the general fund. And so this project, since inception, our goal here for the last 10 years has been to be a utility first and manage our electric fund as if it were an investor-owned utility or a co-op utility. So we endeavored to reduce those transfer levels from upwards of a little bit over 8%, and now for the last 3 fiscal years we've been holding steady at 6%. 6% is a really super important number, because as we talked about on Thursday, if you're a non-municipal municipal corporation, your big 3 revenues are property taxes, state shared revenues, and then electric taxes through your utility tax and your franchise fee. So the 6% represents what a franchise fee would be, because the state statutes give municipal corporations the right to have the franchise of electric utilities as a municipal service. And so that's a municipal service, as well as using public rights of ways to put in hardware. So that's kind of, if you're on Duke, like for example, Commissioner Cannell is on Duke in Leesburg, and he'll pay a franchise fee to the city so that Duke puts their utility stuff in the city's rights of ways. So 6% is super critical. So not only did we get down to that 6% number, back in November we got the referendum passed. So by referendum, the city charter says the transfer cannot be more than 6%. And as we discussed, I won't harp on it tonight, but the municipal utilities are under attack from state legislatures, and the more and more that we can look like an electric utility or an IOU or co-op, the better off we are as we move forward fighting that fight. Capital spending. One of the things that you'll notice in the budget too is capital spending this year is considerably down. Oop, I'm going the wrong way. That's this chart here. Since 2018, and probably a little bit before that, we've really endeavored to improve our system for all the reasons I've talked about. So over the past 6 fiscal years, we've spent about $50 million a year, or $50 million total dollars, probably average around $10 million a year. The good number, the sustainable number, is really around $4 million. But we've shifted blocks. We were doing well, but I don't think we stopped the wagon quick enough. So this year we've changed that, and so you'll see the lowest capital improvement number that we've seen in years in this budget, $2.9 million. One of the reasons that I think we can get away with a significantly lower capital expense this year is because we've stocked up on inventory. This goes back to one of the other issues that we've had with supply issues. We've typically hung out where the inventory is around $4 to $5 million, but as supplies chain lead times have gotten longer, we've brought in more stuff, so we've got the warehouse that has more materials. So when that transformer blows, we've got it in the warehouse. So what we see is we have lots of value in warehouse numbers that has also affected that cash graph. So capital spending, as we get into it, is really a three-legged stool. And you're going to see charts like this, which you've seen in the past, where a transformer, capacitor, distribution line, sectional closer, all that stuff is kind of the repeat. And so if we fix a system, if we expand a system, or if we have new growth on a system, that's all the stuff we need. Hurricane comes, we got to buy a transformer. So it's the same transformer for those three things. And you see a lump sum number in there. We break it down a little bit in the budget, but it's kind of hard to delineate. So I wanted to see if I can get back to it, this chart at you, the capital spending concept. So that chart with all those hardware things, we use those hardware things on three separate items. So it's like a three-legged stool in capital spending for the electric department. The first thing is system upgrades. We see a feeder. So a feeder is a primary line. When you drive down the road, you see the three big wires, if you watch all that kind of stuff, or transformers. We see stuff that's old that needs to be changed out. So these are things that we do on our own in preparation of improving our system. So we call those system upgrades. This year's budget has $1.4 million of additional materials to do specific system upgrades. So that's scaled back, but remember, we still got those big inventory numbers. System upgrades, things that we identify that we need to fix. The next thing is kind of things that we need to fix but are unplanned, but they're system upgrades as well. So they're unplanned system upgrades. The classic example is the hurricane comes in. The hurricane comes in, we get the big winds, it knocks down poles, it knocks out transformers, it breaks wire, yada, yada, yada. That's a system, an unplanned system repair. We go back and we use those same items, but that's in a system repair line. So we're kind of replenishing inventory with that 1.5 million. That's a low number. Again, inventory's high. The next issue there is system expansion. Greatest example of that is when we did, what was it, the feeder system to the villages, call it L59 or something, right? Yeah. So every major distribution circuit is labeled, and the biggest single investment we've probably done recently is the system expansion out to the villages, which is the villages Catherine. I think that number was somewhere around $3-4 million with a return on investment in 3 to 4 years. So again, that's another where you see that number go down, and those meters are spinning, so we're in good shape to recoup. But in the short term, we've got to kind of hold the line here so we can recoup. So remember those moving forward. System expansion, which is developer driven. We haven't planned anything for that, but we feel like we're in the position to react to it when it happens because we've already done a lot of that. System repairs, unplanned. The storm comes, knocks out the lights, and then system upgrades that we foresee. So with that, you throw that back into the ugly chart. And this, you recall, we changed. So this chart represents total cash numbers, and then the blue line represents where the power cost, the bulk power supply account is. And the happy place for this line hangs out at $3 million. So when it's sitting right about here, we'd love to see this line just stay constant and steady. That's what we endeavor to do. When we do that, and we've done it in the past, your rate's low, your rate's consistent throughout the year. We're hoping that the 3 cents a kilowatt that we just changed to in July is going to keep that line at 3 million. So when we got down to here where we're negative 9.5 in the hole, plus the 3, which is the 12.5 that we talk about, I won't keep repeating, but that number, that's the $12.5 million loss. So as of June, we're back up to $500,000 in the black. Yay. So we made significant progress. We lowered that power cost adjustment because the month of June, July, August, September are big sale months, so we can keep that number down. Knock on wood, we feel very comfortable that by end of fiscal year, we'll be back at $3 million. And then probably August-ish, we'll sit down again. and we'll examine whether or not we can tinker that number down a little bit lower. So we'll look at that probably September towards the end of the summer and mix that again with FMPA projections, because now we're getting back to that. So moving forward, what the fiscal year 24 budget does in the electric fund is it really does these 6 things. These are the 6 really super boiled down goals that we've tried to plan for in the budget. Keep the rate down, number 1. Number 2, keep the lights on. Number 3, work safe. Number 4, review operational standards. We impose our own standards on ourselves when we endeavor to fix systems or improve systems or do these type of things. So we're going to review those standards to see, are we building over, are we building under, are there ways that we can save? Because number 6 is we want to get back to where we build a little bit of cash. And like with all the other enterprise funds or the general fund, we want the right amount of cash to be on hand. We don't want too much, but we don't want too little. When we're hanging out here in the electric fund at the recommended reserve number, that's $10 million. Electric department can spend $10 million really quick in a catastrophic event. So we recommend to the commission that a stable electric fund is going to have $15 to $20 million of cash on hand. Once that PCA is back, power cost adjustment is back, and we've recollected that $12 million, the natural place where this is going to be is about $10 million. So we've got $5 to $10 million worth of work to do on this issue. The 5th one I skipped over, which is smart grid. Back in when I first started, smart grid was a big issue. Believe it or not, the GE contract is about to sunset. I think we've got about 2 or 3 years left on that. So Brad is already starting to look at alternatives. That I threw that in an operation expense, but that GE contract number, so to read all the meters, cost the city about $1.7 million a year. So that then goes back into what type of meters we get, and that number can get big, not in terms of power supply big, but it can get to be a $5 million number. So we're already starting to look at ways that when that GE contract expires, how we're going to tackle counting the flow. That's pretty much the electric on an overview, really super simplified. The next few slides just break down attention. So we saw a decrease in power supply of about 13%. We talked about that, so that breaks into about 8.5 million. Some increased divisional costs due to different stuff, about 263 grand. The 2.9 million decrease in distribution. That number talks about how we're kind of shifting some cash flows around. The 1.5 in other divisions for the depreciation stuff, and then the capital expenses there. We break it down for you some more in terms of that's total revenue in 89.5 million, let's call it, and then there's all the divisions of the electric department. So St. Lucie power purchase, those are the 2 sources of wholesale power that we have, our share in the St. Lucie nuclear plant, and the power purchases from FMPA All Requirements Project, which is 99% of our power. You'll see a 3rd line next year, or fiscal year 25, or 26, or is it 25, when we get the solar online. Yeah, we get that line will probably be a positive to us for now. So St. Lucie is a cost item, FMPA is a cost item. Solar should give us a little bit back. I won't go into all the derivatives of solar. Administrator, jobbing, distribution, those are, the core of the pillars of the electric department, keeping the lights on. The smart grid I just mentioned. The others, the transfers and yada, yada, yada. And then the capital projects at 2.9, as we talked about. I know that was 30 minutes on the electric fund. Any questions?
So specific questions. Page 369, the totals, 269, sorry. The 38% increase that we're seeing, so much of it is insurance, it looks like. What is that? Are we insuring more stuff? So it goes up with that, or is this all rate increase that homeowners are seeing going out the,
It's a combination of both.
okay,
But mainly, we have 5 substations, only 2 of them are insured.
okay,
So we went back, we had an audit done, and we insured the other 3. So that was a significant dollar amount.
okay, okay. That was an electric thing. Y'all got anything? Anybody? Okay, so then, what did I want to ask?
All right, going once.
Wait a minute. Wait. I got it circled, but I don't know why I circled it. I got to remember.
I'll ask this. This is an easy one, but maybe a dumb question. But you talked about that GE contract, the meter reading. Is there any technology in the future where you wouldn't have to have people on the ground reading meters?
We don't have people on the ground reading meters. Everything is all automated.
Okay, that's right.
And actually, that was kind of the difference. We went from a lesser automated system to a highly complex automated system when we started the smart grid project. And so now we're getting to the end of that contract, and we're going to try to come up with the best way. Back in the day, that number went, back in the old-fashioned way of reading on the meters and the old analog meters that just spun on your house, remember that when you were a kid? So it cost us about $1 a meter to read that. So our cost went from about $1 a meter to $5 a meter. And I think when I started out in Vandalia, Missouri, it cost about a quarter to read a meter. So we've gone from a quarter to $5 in 30 years. I don't know, Brad probably started out when it was about a nickel to read a meter. I'm kidding. You look right. But obviously, lots of technology, so Brad will be looking at that. But we are remote now, and we've gone from just where you've gone to read it, to the meter reports, what the reading is, to the meter reports, outages, your usages, peak, spike, tampering. So we've gotten high tech, and so that you see that in the cost.
Yeah, I mean, in the operating expenses, we're talking about 59% I mean, that's a lot.
So that there may be, I think worst case scenario, we'll probably see that number rise, 3-5%. Best case scenario, we might have to do a big cash outlay, and then we could bring that down. So there's a bunch of stuff on the table that Brad's looking at. Frankly, we're still reviewing it. I'm just starting to get bits and pieces of it now, but the electric folks are working on it already. More on that to come.
Yeah. Any other questions? Electric fund? Roll it.
Okay, so next we'll jump into gas. Gas is slowly coming. I don't want to say coming back, but
Wait, sorry. Depreciation. Didn't you say you were going to say something about that? Or?
Yeah, essentially what we did, you'll see the depreciation number at
that expense went way down.
2.8. That's down, but I'll try to make the complicated answer really easy. What you see now is the way we bounce. There's a correlation with personnel costs and capital costs and depreciation. So depreciation, you fund yourself, which then goes into renewal and replacement. And frankly, I think the $5 million level that we did was a little bit arbitrary. That was like the much cash that we squirreled away that we could, that went into R&R. But frankly, you go back to that other chart where we spent the $5, $10, $12 million a year, we've eaten into that R&R budget, which is depreciation. Okay. This year's budget, that $2.8 million, even though it's a decrease, because our capital expenses are significantly down, that $2.8 million is a direct cash into you don't see other sources in the budget. So Brandy and I toyed over this, how we wanted to display it, and we knew that number would get your eyes popping. So we wanted to show it in a way where we could explain it easy, which is you don't see a revenue source of other sources in this year's budget. So when you see numbers in the other sources, typically that means we're borrowing from our savings account. That number is 0. Good. So depreciation is down, but it's 2.9. So I'm saying we're budgeting 2.9 in the black. So that 2.9 should be a direct injection into the ugly cash gap.
Okay.
So at the end of the fiscal year, we should have $3 additional million if living in the vacuum.
Okay.
Gas. Gas, we have now kind of propped up. So electric, the franchise fee used that as it was an IOU. So we've kind of shifted our attention over to gas with the partnership with SSGC and the Villages growth and yada yada yada. We talked about that forever. So when we endeavored to do a bunch of the projects like the resource center, the aquatic facility, the ski beach improvements, and the big list of accomplishments, a lot of those were funded with cash injections from the gas department. So I don't know if I'm guessing back to 2013, 10 years ago, probably sitting on $7-8 million in gas cash. So that got whittled way down. And now, as we've gotten through the TICO lawsuit, we see the partnership starting. One of the delays in seeing that cash regenerate is kind of twofold. The first one is in the settlement when we had to kick back those 2,000 customers in Finney to TICO. That we were seeing that growth, but we had to take that growth block as part of the settlement and give those customers back. So we were going to start to see the rapid growth at 3,000 customers. I said 2,000. I think the number was 2,800 or something like that. So we had to start back at zero. And we had to wait for the villages to kind of get out of the settlement territory of TICO and then move into the SSGC Leesburg box as they got into the villages of Catherine. And now as they move over, pretty much everything, all the dirt that you see moving in the villages, if you've ever been down 470, all that's Leesburg gas. So it probably 18-month delay on seeing the numbers come back. So you see kind of our low point there in 19, which was the end of the lawsuit, which was infrastructure improvements we did to do the deal. Now we start seeing that number tick back up to 5 million. The next hole in the bucket is the villages keeps growing. So the long story short, everything pretty much in the gas department is the same. The big capital expense is we need another $1.5 million to put another 6-inch distribution line headed south down Sumter County to serve the area that's pretty much going to be south of 470. So we've got the box that's the city's old 470 property, which is now the Villages of Westlake. The villages are going to wrap back around in their growth box, which is kind of this Lake Sumter County line out to Coleman. What's it, 565 or 550, 561, that north-south road that you can't recognize anymore, kind of where the new charter school is, up to 44. So that's the next growth area. And then when that's done, they're already talking about expansion to go south of 470. So Bob and the guys there are working on needing some cash to get that next line in.
Is that all our territory? All that future growth in the villages?
Yes.
Oh, really? I thought okay.
Yes.
I thought we were half of it. Or
To be determined. When we did the initial performa and we did the box, and we called the box 301 to Villages of Westlake, 44, maybe a mile or so south of 470. We thought that was 25,000 customers, just residential only. And then so at 25,000 customers, we knew we probably net somewhere around $1 million, $1.5 million. Long story short, that performa based on our customer count now is about right. So I think those numbers will be true. So we're just waiting on the customer count. I think I have no idea what the final, and it's a good thing. I think I have no idea what the final villages count is going to be. They have purchased a considerable number of property, so I think you're probably going to be 25,000 plus residential homes as long as the villages goes at their pace. I mean, their pace right now, we know from the Villages of Westlake, is they're since January, they're hanging out at around 270 houses a month that are getting CO'd. So if that pace continues and they start moving south of 470, and I don't remember Robert Chandler's the title, like planning director, development coordinator or something. If you've ever taken the tour with him and gone down 470, he'll take you out there and see that tree. We're like miles past that. And so in English, that means a lot of villages development to come. based on our agreement with SSGC. So South Sumter Utility Company is what, or South Sumter SSGC, I think. South Sumter Gas Company is the derivative they call that. Wherever they go, we're tied to that. Leesburg Gas is tied to that. So that agreement, and that was the big victory in that settlement is, okay, we jumped the gun a little bit and took Finney, but the administrative law judge said that agreement was correct and legal. So that was the big victory in that. So wherever they go, as the Villages calls it, their box is shared with us in terms of gas. So the gas department, so keeping up with that is probably Bob's biggest issue. But pretty much every, so the gas kind of, the process of the gas mimics how we do electric. So gas purchases is the lion's share of that. Then that breaks down into administration, locators, distribution are all the guys out there fixing stuff, different operational stuff in the 4.3 million, and then the capital projects. Let me jump down to that one. And there's your capital project breakdown. And kind of the same type of philosophy as electric with gas. Fix stuff, expand stuff, and fix stuff, expand stuff, and fix it, re-energize old stuff. So stuff blows up, we got to fix stuff that we think is about to blow up and keep up with the capital growth. In gas, the capital growth obviously is driven by the distribution lines, which is part of the agreement with the Villages. One of the other things I'm going to put out there is, maybe not this year, how did that pop up? Gas is probably going to need a new home sooner or later. I think for two reasons. It's extremely old. We're growing at a pace that we can't keep bodies in there, more equipment than need be, and that would be a good location to get out a utility system and personnel from our downtown, put them somewhere else, so that property could either be sold or repurposed for a different downtown kind of commercial use. I love when Commissioner Peterson's
Parking downtown.
There you go. But that will be an expensive endeavor. My guess is before we start feeding money into special projects, we should probably tackle that question. And that'll be $1 million question too, getting them a new spot and finding them the right location. So kind of as Brad's working on smart grid and that, the homework assignment for Bob and the group is a long-term solution to new facilities. I don't know if that'll be 25 or 26, but it's probably the next big thing. Honestly, that's gas. Any questions there?
On the electric fund earlier, you said about a 3% increase is in how much growth in the electric? What kind of growth are what are we talking in the gas fund for reference?
I don't divide that revenue number and then probably add 3 or 4% to it, because the revenue number is we kept it conservative.
For reference for everybody. Thank you.
Let us crunch that number, and I don't want to guess. But
but the growth in the gas department is a good thing for the city of Leesburg, is what.
Yes, and as we talked about, the mechanism there is that growth becomes kind of the next piece of the puzzle for how we fund capital projects back to core Leesburg. So it's Villages tax ad valorem revenue, which also, as more population comes in, means more DST revenue, which means more gas tax revenue. Transportation gas tax, okay, which for streets, which means natural gas surplus monies that then we can go over. So you're looking at potential significant increase in ad valorem and natural gas surpluses that then are the housing area, the go-to funds to fund capital projects in the future. That's kind of been the mechanism on how we've set up and why we endeavored to expand to such an extent. Sure. On a customer basis, I don't know a number, but did you get the number already?
I'm going to say like 8%.
Yeah.
8%. So electric growth, kind of a nice and steady in the defined territory pursuant to state statutes box, 3%-ish. And then
Which stops on the south end down at Lake Deaton, right?
Yeah,
So everything in the villages and stuff, we're not getting the electric on that.
Right,
So that's
right.
That's why it's only 3%.
Right. The electric territory
Yes.
box is roughly the county line to Radio Road, top of Fruitland Park to the top of Lake Denham. That
Right.
box, that's
Right.
electric territory. So everything south of 3327 interchange is now Duke territory.
Right.
So all that ad valorem growth and the planning, Whispering Hills, Hodges, all those.
We'll get our
subdivisions,
franchise.
That's all. We'll get franchise revenue from Duke on that.
Gotcha.
The box for gas is the electric box. Plus, it goes all the way down to Royal Highlands, and then it goes everywhere in Sumter County where the villages goes. So, I don't know, electric customers, maybe our peak in 5-10 years is 35,000 customers-ish if we get significant growth from Orange Bend and the 44 corridor, where, heck, you could be 15,000 was the native load plus 50. So we could one day be where we're at 65,000
Right.
gas customers. So
Right.
double the amount of gas customers versus electric potentially in the future.
Yes. Thank you. Any other gas questions?
Zooming right along to special revenues. So special revenues breaks down into the CRAs, and believe it or not, the building permits. The building department is a special revenue, and not a whole lot to go through in this fund. It's pretty steady as you go. Ann and the group has been busy over there keeping pace with the non-villages growth and different things around. We had a couple of modifications that we needed to do since the draft went out on there's a couple positions that we mislabeled in the budget, so we changed that. But the heartbeat of the building department is back to the cash number. The building department, the bottom line numbers, they're doing about $1.7 million of revenue, permits, inspections, new houses, re-roofs, blue, everything all in the pot, 1.7 million. Back in 2019-ish time frame, we slowly kind of tinked down our fees to match growth, and as growth was coming in, we saw that reserve level continue to rise. One of the special things to keep in mind about the building fund that's different than the other enterprise funds is the state says that you cannot, the state specifically says for the building fund that you cannot spend those funds on anything other than building. So we changed that process because as we saw those monies go up, instead of returning monies, we had this discussion to different contractors. We said, let's just lower the rate and have the most competitive building fees in our region, which we do, and let's deficit spend until such time that we need to increase the rate back to what it was. So what was our override rate was about a 50% reduction in the standard fee. So the yellow line shows that the red line that's zero. So obviously dollars, time. The red line that's zero. You don't want to go below that for sure. The blue line represents the state statutes. It says this is what the reserve requirement of a building fund should be, and anything above that, you can't spend on anything. So that barometer, we've been trying to get back to that number and spending off the surplus, and we've spent off the surplus by keeping our rate down. So in 19, when we started this, we had just south of $2.5 million, and the deficit spend plan was, and we got about 450 grand a year to spend down, and we thought we would do it by fiscal year 24. The thing that's tough to manage in that is the estimate of how much new revenue you're going to get in. So even what we saw experience was that even though we deficit spend, we kept getting more growth, continued to go up. So our estimate on revenues were always low, which continued not to build the cash level, as you see. Well, it did a little bit, And that's kind of, I think this from this year to this year is when we started toying with getting the rate down to where we started seeing it bleed off. So we're actually where we thought here last fiscal year, like halfway between 23, this would be the end of this fiscal year where we'd be at the number. The can got kicked out. So based on our newer projection, we probably can deficit spend now, and we're deficit spending this year about 533,000. Is that what the number is in the building fund? So at that rate, assuming that the revenues are correct and there's not a windfall of revenues, you probably have at least another solid 12 months at the rate we're going to where we really don't have to look at increasing building fees. My guess is if some of those subdivisions occur and they have to start happening, maybe not this fiscal year, but next fiscal year, we'll see that get kicked out a little bit. But I'm not going to say lower the rate. I'm not going to say let's start writing checks back to everybody. I think our plan is solid. It's keeping us competitive. The concept there, encourage growth, friendly development, make sure we're doing our, making sure we've got quality building and everybody's doing their stuff. But probably next year, maybe the year after or sometime mid 25, we need to look at revisiting that rate. That's kind of the microcosm of the building fund. And that's the detail. Pretty much everything in the building fund is personnel related, like most of the other funds. Any questions there? All right. Moving into the other special revenue funds. So the other special revenue funds include the 3 community redevelopment agencies. The city has 3. We have the Greater Leesburg CRA, as we affectionately call the Downtown CRA, whereby the City Commission and 2 members of the public form the CRA board, one from the east part of the district and the west part of the district, and the divide, I believe, is Canal Street, the Carver Heights CRA, and then the 441 CRA. So these next series of slides talk about the status of those CRAs. And long story short, from a high level, the CRAs are actually doing very well. We're seeing nice growth. We talked about that in our preliminary DR 420 talk, where when the initial numbers came back, you saw 24% total growth of the city, 33% in the general fund. We broke that number down, and then like 10, 9, 12%-ish in the other 3 respective CRA funds, where the 441.27 CRA was kind of the big winner at the 13% growth number. So the first one is the Greater Leesburg CRA, the Downtown CRA. Its cash position is relative to the special projects that we do. At the end of the fiscal year, we'll see it having somewhere around $255,000 in cash. The total CRA take, remember, the CRA is the increment. So when you create that CRA, you have the base year of increment. You put the box around the targeted blighted area that we want to see. We calculate all the taxable values and the tax revenues. That's called year 1. And anything above that has to go into the improvements pursuant to your plan. That increment from the city is then matched with the increment from the county. So you get the county money plus the city money, and that creates the increment that you can spend in your box. This year, for fiscal year 24, it's about $900,000, and here's how we spend it. The first one is pursuant to the decree with the NAACP that was back in the mid-90s. We have to share the increment with the Community Development Corporation of Leesburg. So that half of that 900, which is about 465 this year, goes to the CDC. That leaves us with about the same to spend. The first thing that we have to do is pay the debt on the Mainstream project. I think that was a $1.3 million bank note, and it was 10 years. Yeah, so we're about halfway through it. The debt payment on that is $100,000. So after that, we have $350,000, which we didn't have a specified project for. hence the conversation that has been going on. I don't know if you want to stop and talk about that in detail now. But the concept there would be you got the request from the partnership. The partnership is asking for an events contract. Their request was $450,000. So speaking as your financial advisor, if I get to say that, the real easy way to house that is in the CRA. We don't have 450, but we've got 350. So I would recommend to you that if you go down that avenue, you would potentially keep that contract in the confines of the CRA revenue. The trade-off is what capital project do you do? I think one of the things that we've done extremely well in the city of Leesburg for the last 10 years is pick and choose. For every action, there's an opposite and equal and opposite reaction. But I think we've done well managing, let's focus on this and not go too far or too little, and that's kept us in a good financial position. So there is a trade-off. The trade-off is pushing off capital projects. I would recommend to you now is probably a good time that if we're going to experiment with the partnership in this events type of thing, that now is a good time to do that, because we got another slide to show you all the things that we're going to be working on when we get to capital projects. So from a staff level, we got our hands full from internal projects as well as growth-driven projects. In the future, we should have those ad valorem potential natural gas revenues then that can be another source. And then the third thing is you see other communities that spend upwards between $500,000 to $1 million in events. The philosophy that we got into with the partnership, I guess way back to the 90s, significantly before my time, was that through Bike Fest and through the partnership, the city didn't have to spend considerable dollars on events because the partnership was there for us to provide those events from profits from the Bike Fest. I think, speaking crudely, I think it's probably that model that was created back in the early 90s doesn't work anymore. And I think it doesn't work anymore for a couple of reasons. One, it's kind of a victim of its own success. And as events have occurred, small businesses within the district have grown. That's taken some of the share from the partnership when they have their events. So some of that cash isn't available, but that's a good thing because now you're starting to see kind of a regeneration of downtown come, and that's what we want. We want to see that private market to survive and flourish in our downtown. I think the other thing too is that some of the targets of COVID and those type of things have impacted events. So the concept becomes is as those profit margins in the partnership have dwindled for those reasons, they're struggling not just to meet ends, but then to have monies to provide events. So the request is, if you give us the 450, then we can give you these events. That's the overall high-level synopsis of the letter of your request. And the trade-off is that kicking the can down the road on capital projects, which I don't think for the next couple of years is a significant issue. And I think it's probably an opportunity that if you go down that road, that this is the place to house that experiment. And if you go down that road, based on your feedback tonight, then I think the next step is probably putting together a formal agreement with the partnership, which you would review and approve potentially before we adopt the budget in September, and then make it effective congruent with the fiscal year October 1. That's the downtown CRA.
So I'll go on the record and say I've been thinking about this way before I came on the commission. It's something that when I came on the commission, I went and approached the partnership about. Our events are good, but I think they can be better, and I want them to be free for everyone in the community. So when you come to our events, you don't have to pay for certain things. So I asked the partnership to put this together so our events can go even better. And like Al said, most surrounding cities spend $700,000 to $1 million a year on their events. So.
I think everybody knows I'm pro partnership. COVID did impact them. I've given my speech before. I am pro partnership. I enjoy the events. I missed the events during COVID. I don't think I realized how much I did miss them until COVID hit. And the partnership's been around 25 years. They've done a great job for the community. I would support it. If we're going to support it, I don't take this lightly. I feel like we need to do the 450 because we're putting a lot of pressure on that. We expect them to perform, do the events right. If they don't, they might be at risk of this contract, could be in jeopardy a year from now. I'm not sure it's fair to do that at the 350 level. I guess the partnership can do a presentation, but I did. I met with the partnership. I talked about this. I feel like they deserve the 450, and then but there's pressure on them to do it right. That's my position.
And I'll second the additional 100,000 as well.
We've got someone who has a question for us.
Yes, thank you. As always, when
Give us your name, Betty, and the record. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm Betty Stevens Coney, and I represent the constituency of the Greater Leesburg CRA, of which it has been my pleasure to do. And several months ago, I presented before the board 3 items, and they were historical markers and bathrooms for the Johnson Park. And we explored and talked about and dreamed about a pavilion for that part of town. So my question is, how will the experiment that we're talking about, 450,000 or 300 or whatever it is, how does this affect the constituency in which I represent? I do not want to see it not included, and that our people on the other side not get what is due to us or them.
Well, we share the money, that comes into the Greater Leesburg CRA. So you have that half, so we're taking half and spending it, allocating it to the partnership in downtown, but the other half is going to your group.
Okay.
Okay. So there's the money that we would have to work with on those projects.
And the partnership is not a selective
I could argue.
target.
I could argue it's citywide.
That's for the citywide benefit. All the events are open to the public. Yeah. So, it's not like the partnership is targeting a different group.
Right. I understand that. I fully understand that. However, what I want to be reassured of is that this investment in the proposal does not affect what we put before the board already. And I want to be assured, if I can, that we will get the bathrooms at Johnson Park and the markers. And while we can't
I do think that we did agree to the markers.
Yes,
that much was approved, but there has been no approval.
The markers were, we didn't get those numbers in there. That's not a big number.
Right, it's not.
So
but the bathrooms is a discussion to be held. And the pavilion was a discussion to be held. These are not items that are going to necessarily happen. It's just in the discussion phase.
All of these things that we're talking about are just in the discussion phase.
The things you're bringing to us, the pavilion, there was no decision made by the CRA.
Yes.
There was no decision. There was a decision on the markers. Mm-hmm. And on the bathrooms, there was no decision made. There was consensus that it would be a good idea, but there was no allocation of funds for any of those projects.
As I remember, regarding the bathrooms, there was discussion of the comparison, and I think there was an oversight that there were not bathrooms at Johnson Park, and there needed to be. And yes.
Correct.
So,
That was the flavor of the conversation. Yes.
and I was under the impression further that it was a bit more of a flavor, but a desperate need to do so.
I actually thought we agreed to do, there was a consensus. I thought the bathrooms, we didn't approve it, but I thought there was pretty much an agreement. But
That's what I-
that does need to
be
come
done.
But
But
that,
at what point? That's,
I thought I remembered.
come back.
but the pavilions did not. The pavilions were not well received by the community or the
Look,
commission.
We're going to hit we've got some other monies. We've got some other monies. So let's get through the rest of the program. And then, like we do every year, we throw out a bunch of different projects, and then we got to firm up this list. The signs are not a financial issue.
Correct.
Okay? The bathroom, probably 250 to half a mil. I got some concepts. Maybe it doesn't all come out of the CRA. Probably need to go back to DST, but we've got some DST money sitting there still. So if it's the want to get the bathroom at the park done, that's an easy do. It starts competing a little bit with some other stuff. I'm not wigged out as far as shifting the financial blocks.
May I add, please, the agreement for the bathrooms were agreed upon, but it didn't circle back around. The awareness was we didn't know bathrooms weren't there, and that was the thing. But the other items were to come back to acceptability.
And we did. We kicked it to the budget workshop hearings, and I failed to mention it in there.
So we're good for the bathrooms for Johnson Park.
If I can speak on behalf of the commission.
We don't have numbers. We don't have numbers
If I can
yet.
speak on behalf of the commission, what I think we need to do is come back out, we'll polish this off. Let's get the rest of look, we've got the other two CRAs, we've got DST monies. We'll do our thing, and I think we need to modify it, and we'll bring back a modified proposal. My guess is you won't find the John L. Johnson Park and the Greater Leesburg CRA will probably hit up some DST money to get it done. We just need to shuffle the blocks around. We're good at that. So we'll need to shuffle the deck.
So the records will show then that.
We'll show
think,
what?
This is a workshop.
Yes.
I think the consensus I'm getting from the commission is shuffle the deck and bring back a modified proposal. And then modified proposal will take a look at the John L. Johnson Park.
Correct.
I think the pavilion is not moving forward.
At this point, right.
Yeah.
Okay. But I get the impression, or may I get the impression, that we are agreeing to the provision in concept or principle?
You got a firm yes on the signs, and you got a minute or go back and shuffle the deck on how we get the park in there, the bathroom.
Okay.
So like we do every year, as we get through the cap. So tonight's the big deal because it's the capital CIPs. So let's get through all the special revenues, and we'll get priority list. And so the John L. Johnson Park bathroom is on the priority list. That doesn't mean it's done, but you're tracking it.
Perhaps one thing that can move us forward is to realize that this may be something we want to really especially do, realizing that Mr. Johnson just passed, and this would be an honorable thing to do in his name. Okay? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Just wanted to echo, I'm John Christian, pastor of the Christian Worship Center. Echoing Ms. Coney's sentiments, being the pastor of Mr. John L. Johnson, a great icon here in the city of Leesburg. We talk about the entire city. John L. Johnson Park is a very utilized park in our city that does not have a bathroom. So when we talk about consideration, that's what we're here. We're here in a budget workshop. So this is not final. This is what we're here to do, to discuss what can be added to the budget, taken from the budget to make these things happen. You are charged, your city manager, to go back and find money. I don't think anyone in the community will be concerned where you get the money from. We just want to see bathrooms at the John L. Johnson Park. But this is why we're here tonight, to discuss the budget, to see what's needed in the budget, things that the city manager or the commission may not have thought of. And I did notice in this CRA, there's no mention of home improvement grants or anything for the residents of this CRA. So I would like the commission to at least consider adding some funds in this part of the Leesburg for those residents who may need assistance with home improvements as well.
Thank you.
So we'll go back and modify and report back. Those reports will come back to you now at your regular meetings. Okay. Any other questions on the downtown CRA? The other side of that spectrum too is based on your feedback. I'll get with Joni and I will be in touch to start figuring out how we do the parameters of that agreement. Okay. Downtown CRA.
Where does civic funding come out of?
Solid waste. Are we doing civic funding today? And I lied to you. I thought so too. So that'll be Wednesday or Thursday. Okay. I got my days mixed up, Commissioner. Okay, so Carver Heights CRA. Carver Heights CRA is obviously growing. I thought it was 800. Is it 500? It's 500 cash. So the proposal here, Commissioner Berry has spent a lot of time with me kind of asking for the body to, a couple of modifications since the budget came out. So, and again, just as you know, ultimately the commission establishes the budget for the CRA, which will be in September. But Commissioner Berry has spent some time with me about some of the concepts that she would like to see in the budget, and the Carver Heights CRA kind of is essentially breaks down to a personnel expense for housing, operations of the resource center, debt on the resource center, and then kind of the revenue that's left over after to do various capital projects. So that's kind of the areas that we're talking about. So the overall CRA brings in the $500,000 is a little bit of a misnomer because we're bringing in the 176. So probably closer to what this minus this number is kind of the growth revenue number. So in the neighborhood of the high 700,000s, not 929. That's the actual increment. So the concepts are in the general operations. You have promotional activities, which we've done. We've increased the home grant, so we've put some money in there. Some improvements to Corrine Williams Park to add a restroom facility there and to update the blight study and the master plan. So that's housed there. And those are kind of considered operationals. So in a review, it would be the personnel costs, the operating expenses, which is of the resource center, which we include, the blight study update, the debt service on the resource center, and then these additional projects for the board's consideration. First is the Boys and Girls Club tuition. This concept comes as kind of an insurance policy to ensure that the investment in the Teen Center and the Boys and Girls Club partnership works well. the concept is to work with another agreement with the Boys and Girls Club. And I think if you would do something like this, then the civic funding for the Boys and Girls Club would go away. But we had a meeting with the Boys and Girls Club, some other community members, and Commissioner Berry, Travis Ryman and I sat down, had the discussion on ensuring that the youth in the community are taken care of, for lack of better words, and that is through the Resource Center. That was why we created the facility. That's why we partnered with the Boys and Girls Club. So where does that big number of 120 come from? One of the concerns that we've heard is that the tuition is hard for folks to pay, and that is an impact on enrollment at the Boys and Girls Club. So the capacity at the building, rough numbers, the capacity at the teen center, I think, was about 80 kids. The tuition payment for them, I think there's like a $25 initiation, then it's $20 a month for the summer, so 3 months, $30 a month for 9 months while the kids are in school. So all those numbers added together times 40, which represents 50% of the capacity. So Boys and Girls Club says they're at about 50% capacity now. This 120 would ensure that the facility is full, paid for from the Carver Heights CRA. I don't see that as a direct check that you would write to the Boys and Girls Club, but an agreement whereby the Boys and Girls Club awards tuition to eligible folks that would then receive a subsidy in the tuition from the city paid out of the Carver Heights CRA. The home grant, obviously, you talked about, we not just talked about, but we improved and increased the Carver Heights grant, the home grant limits. So a focus then would be to take that higher number. We increased it from 5,000 to 25,000 or 27,000 based on whether you contribute or not contribute. Commissioner Peterson is shaking his head. So it's there. So we're working on a $25,000-ish grant, but the request for funding would be $300,000. So the goofy number here of 229 is this plus the residual that's already in the fund that hasn't been spent makes 300. So that 300 divided by 25 is, what's the 10, 12 potential homes or whatever that division is. The next potential concept too would be there was a concern that Commissioner Berry's expressed about public safety in Carver Heights and a want for more police officers in Carver Heights. Our police department, and I'll be super brief, and I'm sure Chief can talk about this ad nauseum if you really want to hear that. That doesn't deminimize it, but it is a budget workshop. But, you know, there's a concern that the police department in general, we need more officers. To get more officers, we needed to increase pay. To fund pay, therein lies the overall struggle. So step one was the big CBA collective bargaining agreement that we approved last month, whereby we increased pay to $60,000 for that entry-level officer and then addressed compression. We funded that through surplus monies in '23, which got us through this year, but we also balanced it on the back of the shortage of officers that Hicks already has on an already understaffed department. Right? So we got a double whammy. I think the chief will advocate that Leesburg Police Department to cover the city as is probably needs to be in the mid-80s officers, and then throw in the growth in South Leesburg. We probably are looking at a department that needs to be upwards of 90. So we have the struggle of the recruitment. So we address the recruitment with the increased salaries. We address the budget gap of the salaries with some surplus cash that we have for the general fund and freezing 7 positions. So at 73, which is a low number, we're actually, is it 73? Okay, 73, and we're down 7 for vacancies. Then plus, you know, we've got some more comp issues, so he's probably down to somewhere around 7 to 10, depending on who's out or who's not. So there's definitely a deficiency in bodies. Number one thing, get higher pay. Higher pay then makes us a better recruiter. But in the interim, there's a want for additional policing services or more focused policing services in the Carver Heights area. So a way to bridge the gap, note the word choice, bridge the gap, is use the Carver Heights CRA money to help fund and unfreeze positions for more patrol coverage, and then slowly wean back that CRA funding back to ad valorem funding in the general fund as we see the village's growth come on. So let me digress in that for the folks in the audience, because this is probably the biggest budget workshop attendance we've ever had. But we had this detailed discussion. Was it the last meeting? No, it was on Thursday night, when we talked about making a plan for the new village's money. So the brief of that, because you've already heard it once, was somewhere around $1 billion that we anticipate in taxable value from the village's growth, 3,200 units times 3,000 taxable value, times a potential millage rate is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $3.3 million new dollars that we would anticipate for fiscal year 25. Folks, we're talking about fiscal year 24 right now. So, but that village's influx, at the current rate, Villages of Westlake is probably going to have about 3,000 of the 3,200 units by December 31st. So as long as that house is built and CO'd by December 31 and 24, that means in 25 it gets assessed. I said the dates wrong. As long as it's done in 23, so 24 it's assessed, which is fiscal year 25, which starts in October. Sorry, I know it's confusing. So we anticipate that there's going to be another injection of new growth revenue. So we laid out that plan for you on Thursday night last week of the priorities of where that new money should be spent. Because the recommendation is we should have some sort of outlying plan that focuses that money. So, as you know, I quoted Carrie Baker, so the money's not spent and gone on whatever before all the work that we did. So the plan was, priority number one, according to your city manager, was the surcharge. Whittle down the surcharge. A third of that, $1.1 million. Plan number two, more police officers. 1.1 million gives you about 12 new officers. So potentially in fiscal year 25, you unfreeze those last positions and then add 12, or give me some fudge and some wiggle room in those numbers, because I'm talking round numbers. Then the last third, 1.1 million, would be potential capital improvements. And if we don't have an identified capital improvement, we squirrel that money away in the CIP fund, just like we've done, because we've kind of had a pay-as-you-go type policy for general fund improvements, general improvements around the city. So we've been hesitant to issue debt when it's associated with the tax base. So that was a little bit of circuitous talk, but the concept would be immediate focus on public safety, bridge the gap of CRA dollars, unfreeze some of those positions, use that CRA money to get some designated cops for Carver Heights. That allows that influx of more protection. So recap, the kind of a modification of the plan is personnel stays about the same, the blight study redo, the debt payment, the Boys and Girls Club tuition, the funding for the home grant, and the officers. Questions?
I'll jump in here and stir it up a little bit. First of all, I would support the police officer being paid out of the general fund, so as not to penalize the CRA, which is making good progress. I talked out a little bit about this, maybe splitting it, doing different things, but I don't, one of our duties is provide police service. I just feel like we should pay that out of the general fund. And then secondly, I'll come back to that if needed. I'm sure there'll be plenty of comments on this. I'm struggling struggling supporting a blight study. That just seems like a waste of $50,000 that I could find better ways to spend. I mean, we seem to have a pretty good plan on what we want to do in Carver Heights. I'd rather take the $50,000 and apply it to what that group wants to do. That's just my opinion right there. So those are my only two comments on those up there. For now.
The feedback, let me give you some feedback on that. I certainly think it's a struggle on the financing of how we bring in new police officers. I think everybody agrees that we do need to expand the police department. And so how do you do that? 239 here. So go back to the tax number that y'all set yesterday, Monday night. So we set the DR 420 at the rollback rate. So going from that 3.4245 to the 3.47, that gets you $100,000. And remember, we also had that $70,000 in the black already in there. So if you go to the rollback number, there's an immediate $170. I think we can probably get the rest. You would polishing up some of our revenue numbers, which you guys force me to do every year to make my revenue projections bigger than I want to. But I think that's a happy compromise because generally we're more conservative. But we've come out with good numbers. So the process has worked. So long story short, but there's the if. If you go with the rollback rate, you can tackle that question. But remember, you got another $100,000 question hanging in the balance with the partnership thing. So just my knee-jerk reaction from kind of some of the things that we talked about. We got John L. Park hanging out there. My guess is I'm gonna probably, my knee-jerk is go to DST monies and get that there. If you go to the rollback, you can cover cops there if you kick it over to the general fund. And then the $100,000 to get to the $450 for the partnership, I'm probably going to say go spend some of the cash down, the $250 that you're sitting on. And that's probably a good bridge number, too, because ironically, 2 years, is right. So maybe it's a 2-year contract with the partnership at $450. Just broad concepts for food for thought for your discussion.
So I don't want to get too bogged down or overly complicate this, but piggybacking off of those comments, what if we funded 2 out of the general fund, let the CRA agree that CRA will fund 1 police officer for 1 year, and we'll absorb it in the years thereafter, just to help this little funding gap here. I know we're juggling money around.
I'm going to say let's work in the block of 3s.
Okay, I was just throwing out ideas.
And here's why I say that. It was the 7 positions, and what we said 3 halves. And then we we left 4 unfunded that we need to go back in for 27 or for 25.
Yes.
So there's a performer we did, and I don't remember it. But the quicker we tackle it with existing revenues, the more we don't have to use villages' revenue to unfreeze positions. So if we can get more cops unfrozen now, we can add more later.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I was just throwing out ideas.
So we need to beat those numbers up. But I think we're on track because as we do this every year, we've got all the big broad concepts, and out of these workshops, we've got 2 to 5 things that we need to drill down on. So we're on track.
I'd like to add, please, the Florida statutes allows you to use the tax increment funding, the TIF money, to fund for community policing in CRA areas. I don't see that as being, did you reference as waste, or did you?
No. I'm not taking away from you. I'm helping you. You misunderstood my comment. I'm saving money in your CRA. I'm taking it out of the general fund, so I'm beefing up your CRA to allow you to continue doing the projects that we've been doing. So I'm trying to keep everybody happy.
Right.
I understand the law enforcement issue, but this will free up money to move forward with the other projects that the CDC, CRA want to do.
But my request was to designate the police to the Carver.
Oh, and I'm saying that.
Okay.
Okay, that's where we misunderstood each other right there. No, I'm saying whatever you. I understand you have concerns in Carver Heights, and I'm saying I think the city has a duty to provide those services, pay for them out of the general fund to benefit the CRA indirectly.
Okay.
So no, I'm glad you clarified that.
Just educate me. How do you have specific officers that are just for that box? Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
So then what happens when the next box wants specific garbage service for only their box?
Let me give you a high-level answer to that. I'm not looking at Chief's
that ain't gonna
face
work.
as I answer this, but roughly, to explain it just super easy, the police department breaks down patrols into zones around the city.
Right.
The Carver Heights box roughly matches an existing zone.
And
That's
when,
not perfect, and there's still a little bit of wiggle room in there, but of all the areas where if you were going to use CRA money for police services, that would be the best one to get the check and balance, because it's unequivocal. Commissioner Berry is correct. Using CRA money for designated policing is an allowable expense.
Right.
And it is in our existing CRA plan. So I don't think there is a statutory issue that we have with that concept.
and I'd like to add, there's a critical need to have police presence there in the community.
Oh, I can agree. I'm looking at how it's going to work. How does it happen in reality? Are those officers, they can't go outside the box? Are they sworn to that area? Or I think it's a lot easier to talk about it than it is the application of actually doing that is going to be hard. I like adding more police officers. I'm not, and if they have a focus on Carver Heights, but the idea that somehow we're like designating new officers for a certain part of town, is that what we want to start doing? We want to start having different services in different parts of town, or are we all,
With the situation which currently going on, with the staffing of police being a shortage, if you had designated cops just in the area to manage, help cut down on the regular street crimes, the speeding, it's all a comprehensive project as a pilot to see if it works. I don't know what the schedule would be with 2 days on, 2 days off. I can't get into how the police force works with the schedule. That would be Chief Hicks, but the ideal goal and the vision is to have police presence to control what is going on in the area, meaning instead of having to call for police to get there, the police are already there. The residents had established a relationship with the cops. The cops are there to provide protection and security for the residents and the constituents who are there. And it's just a clear picture of cops that are that look like me, black or brown, are there to assist with the issues that are going on in that area.
any other comments?
I have.
Okay.
Dr. Erica Jasper, CRA board member. In reference to the police issue and the $250,000, I agree with you, Mayor. How would we do that, saying that 3 police officers is a bit excessive for the Carver Heights area, considering there's not a whole lot of crime when you look in the grand scheme of things. I live there in that community, been there pretty much all my life since, when I came back home and everything. I will say, too, 7 positions vacancy, and we're using $250,000 of the CRA funds. We could leverage that money, as Peterson was alluding to. There is a Florida statute, 163.387, that states if you use these CRA funds, the police officers are in that block. They cannot leave that territory. They can't use their patrol cars outside of that territory. I'm not sure, Al, if you're aware of that, or the police chief, if you are aware of that. But they cannot, if you use these funds, you cannot deviate outside of those parameters of the CRA. So I'm like you, how would this work in a reality standpoint? Yes, I understand that police, their jobs are very challenging. Yes, it's very hard. They never know what they're walking into from day to day. But that is my question. I think it's a bit excessive to use 3 police officers when you have 7 vacancies, positions at this time. Also, too, I have additional questions while I'm here at the platform in reference to the boys and girls tuition, the $120K. Al, I know that you said that's for about 80 kids.
I think the number is
40?
It's either, honestly, it's either.
About 40 kids, because I wasn't included in the meeting. I didn't know anything about the meeting. My question is, do we have adequate staffing to accommodate this influx of children? I don't know how that would work. Also, too, where are these kids coming from? They have to be in the CRA. If we're going to use CRA funds, they have to come from the CRA. So I'm not sure, did we look at the proposed comprehensive plan moving forward? Yeah, we give them $120,000 this year, but what happens next year? I mean, I was one of those children once upon a time. I don't want to boost them up and then let them down next year. That's one of my questions. So what's the longevity of a plan of this proposal? Are we just doing this just to say that we're doing something? Or, I mean, what's the contingency plan, the comprehensive plan, long-term moving forward? And lastly, regarding the housing grant program, I think, how many houses are we doing with that program? 12 houses?
300 divided by 25.
300. So, okay, so we're taking 300,000 and we're going to only use it for 12 people. There's a number of people here from the Woodland Park area. I think there's more than 12 in this audience here. I think that we should take that program and extend it, maybe do 25 homes and give them 10,000 or 30,000 if that's the case. Divide the 300,000, extend it, make it wider and broader so that more people can benefit from this program, not only from Woodland Park, but also in the greater CRA area, including Carver Heights and Mount Clair, if needed, if they fit into that program. That was one of my questions. And I just think overall, our total budget for this is a little too small. I think we should take this $867,000 and leverage it. You know, I like to think big and be big and do big things, but we can take this $860,000 and make it $4 million. That way we can do greater projects as we leverage this money in the CRA. So those are some of the questions and concerns that I had, and I think, once again, the housing program do need to come from the general fund. The police need to come from the general fund, and perhaps the scholarships need to come from the general fund so that we can take the $867,000 and leverage that to $4 million. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Cressida Foster, and I am part of the Woodland Park community. And I heard Mr. Allen say something about the Corey William Park was a restroom. We already have a restroom. We don't have a pavilion. We have birthday parties to bring the whole neighborhood, help the families bring the stuff out of the park. And we need something for the kids to sit up under from the weather. And then I would also like to say about the home improvement. A lot of the houses in the Woodland Park community been like that since they were put up in the Woodland Park community. Like, the only thing that they improved out there are the roads. That's it. Add a little stuff to the park, but it's not enough. We don't have internet, none of that at our park. I think we're the only park in the community that don't have Wi-Fi access. So, that's it.
Is that like Comcast doesn't?
No, it's through the city. City of Leesburg, that Carver Heights, everywhere how you can sit there and hook up to Wi-Fi. They don't have the access in the city. It's right behind our park. So I'm like, well, we can't have Wi-Fi access too. So that's it.
Great evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Fred Griffin Jr. I'm the president of West Leesburg CDC. I get the phone calls. I have to go to the homes and or walk the community, sleepless nights and taken away from my business that I run 24 hours a day. So with that being said, I think that the patrolling of the police police officers, that funds should come from the general funds. We have so many other issues that's going on in Carver Heights that we need to tackle. Another issue is homelessness. Of course, we know that's around the whole country that's going on. But also, with that being said, the phone calls that I also get regarding rental assistance. I have a senior citizen that calls daily or in her community a complex stating that she's going to be evicted because she's on an $800 fixed income and they're going up on her rent of $300. I have wrote the legislators to address my concerns, and they have asked what can they do to fix this issue. So this is not only a state issue, but we should start here with our city first. So back to the general funds, I think some of these funds should come from the general funds. Let us tackle the issues that's very critical within our community. Remember, commissioners, that we're voted in by our citizens. So if we're not listening to our citizens, then we're doing them a disgrace. Thank you.
Once again, Mayor Commissioners, I'm Pastor John Christian, this time representing the Men of Distinction. I heard Commissioner Reisman say when he came on the commission how he was excited about the partnership and the marketing plan. The Men of Distinction for 21 years have put on the Leesburg Black Heritage Festival. So I would request today from the Carver Heights CRA that you grant the Men of Distinction through the CDC $20,000 to implement the Leesburg Black Heritage Festival since it's such a great idea. So I just want to make sure that was known, and that's a request from the Men of Distinction and the CDC to put on the Leesburg Black Heritage Festival. And I said to Miss Berry that I would support her in her quest for police in Carver Heights. While I was there, I've been pulled over by the police department so many times with tag light out, tent too dark. So I'm not a huge fan of 3 police officers, but I'm willing to give anything a try if it's going to improve the Carver Heights community. I just hope they don't pull me over for tinted windows, tag light, and I know that's how we catch the bad guys, but I would just urge, and I know our chief's going to do a great job to ensure that officers, when they interact with the people in the Carver Heights community, that they treat them with respect and honesty, and that was my big concern about extra police officers, but I do want us to make sure we check the statutory requirements when we talk about giving $120,000. We make sure those kids come from the Carver Heights CRA. The police officers remain in the Carver Heights CRA, and they take care, and we train them properly on how to interact with young people. I have 3 African-American sons and a daughter who frequently rides through Carver Heights. I ride through Carver Heights, and the last thing I want them to do is be pulled over by untrained police officers, because we do have vacancies, which means that people are not applying for these jobs. So we may not get the best of the best. We may get the worst of the worst. So we got to make sure that, I know our chief does a very good job. We have this conversation all the time about who do we select to work at the Leesburg Police Department. So when we say vacancies, it's not because people don't want to work here. It's probably because our chief won't hire them because they don't meet his criteria. So I just want the commission to be very understandable that oftentimes vacancy does not mean even at $60,000. Sometimes they're just not a good fit for our community or our city. So before I sit down, once again, the Men of Distinction Commission, hope you would push and add $20,000 to the budget for the Black Heritage Festival, the only African American festival in Leesburg. And we do bring people from all over the state to our festival. Thank you.
I'd like to add one more thing, please, to the home improvement grant that the comments were made. This home improvement grant, I met with the residents of Woodland Park on April 27th, in which that development consists of 48 homes. Out of the 48 homes, I had 28 homeowners to attend the meeting and complete a survey stating what was needed for the improvements of their homes. From that, I brought back to the city and addressed the issue and my concern. These are people that are needing assistance to have some form of improvement done to their home, from basic stuff to HVACs to you name it. I'm not going to go through the list again. My concern is now we are at a point in which we can streamline this and put our dollars together in the budget. The CRA money is used for helping and improving homes. That is what my request is for. The goal is a win-win all the way around. You improve the house as far as the tax dollar amount. You open eyes for mainstream investors to see opportunities come in. And once you have everything improved and improve the look of the blight in the district as well as the city, you then are improving the morale of the residents. You're increasing everyone to participate in keeping areas clean. And with our policing the area, there again we have safety. Once this, as Al, the city manager, said earlier, that this money would be, there will be more money. This will be reinvested into the CRA as the improvements come, as the tax dollars come. And for the next year in 2025, there will be more money available so that we can improve more houses in the other parts of the district and the other parts of the town. It'll just continue. I can't imagine anyone having to live and make choices based because someone thinks that it's not necessary. If you just ride through the area of District 1 on District 1 period, you would make your own assessment. I just want to make sure that we all are under the same understanding of we're trying to improve our city. And the request that I've made, I think, is very fair. I think it's providing every opportunity for everyone to be a part of this win-win situation. And if we don't start from somewhere, I mean, we don't start at some point, we'll never know. I don't think it's fair to judge to decide what type of cop will be recruited, would join this group. We have no idea. I would know that, and I trust that Chief Hicks would make sure that these are experienced police coming into the area that would provide safety for all. I don't care if you have a busted light or whatever, you should be stopped. If you have something you're doing illegal, you should be stopped. It should not be anything different from any other area of the city of Leesburg. I think that we all realize the importance of trying to bring areas up to standards so that we can continue to build new homes to invite others to come into the area, as well as rehabbing a look to make Leesburg better. Now, I'm not going to go back and forth. This is my final statement, so you will be fine to make whatever comments you want to. I just want to be fair and let the commission know, as well as everyone else in the room, the taxpayers of the room. This money is for, the CRA is established to improve the areas of that, for blighted areas and lower income. And if you don't request for it, and if you don't use it in this way, what are we doing? So I'm just going to leave it at this and say, think about it, and we won't have to make major decisions now. And we're not going to have we can agree to disagree. I think we're all wanting the same thing for the city, but we have different approaches and different agendas. As a new commissioner, my concern and my win was to make the area better. My constituents voted me in to make improvements, and that's what I'm trying to do. Thank you.
Great job. Well said. I also wanted to add one other thing. I know we had a meeting earlier this year with the West Leesburg CDC community meeting, and the residents from the CRA area, they voiced concerns about speed bumps and lighting. I don't see any of that here in the budget. So maybe if we could add some of that, some speed bumps and lighting throughout the Carver Heights area, Woodland Park, and Mount Clair area, increased lighting, shall I say. That was a major concern of many of the residents that came to that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Darrell Reeves. I'm the pastor of Mount Ariat Metropolitan Missionary Baptist Church, which is adjacent to John Johnson Park. I play basketball, and since there's no bathrooms there, we have to sometimes let the young people use, especially the girls, use the restrooms. Question is, when does the city manager sleep? This blows my mind that one man can stand here and go through all of this and have a complete grasp of all of it. Where is this AI? The police officers, necessary and important. When I call 911, I want a Leesburg police officer there as soon as possible. We have a very good police department. We have an excellent chief of police. The thing that I just want to add is, I grew up in an area where police officers lived in our community, and it made a world of difference. We knew where the police officers lived, and because they lived in the area, we as young people knew how to behave. It makes a tremendous difference. And I know a lot of communities, police officers, 60 grand is not a lot of money. It sounds like a lot. And they've got to raise families, they've got to pay for all this kind of stuff, and it's a lot. And a lot of cities do something where they can assist the police officers in their living expenses so it's not as expensive. And if so, as we're making all this development, if we can somehow make it available for these police officers to live at a lower rate in these areas where people know where the police officer is located in our community, I think it'd make a world of difference. Just want to share that.
So, on the subject, it's all clear, Al, what we want? Maybe you can sum up the direction we're headed in, because I'm a little foggy up here.
Crystals. We'll wrap up the input, and we'll be back to you, the commission. Intercapacity as a CRA member, Dr. Jasper asked for a meeting on Monday. It was the 24th. So we'll bring you some, we'll get you some more recommendations and flush stuff out for that meeting with the CRA board. So we'll take tonight's input and move forward and beat it up some more next Monday with this in the CRA capacity. All right. So barring any other questions on Carver Heights, I never thought I'd say moving on to the 44127 CRA was going to be easy, but it is. Steadily building cash in the 44127 CRA. This chart is the chart that has guided us on the 44127 CRA, really since I've been your city manager and since inception. So again, for the new commissioners on board, just to review, the situation we ran into with the 44127 CRA was that when we issued approximately $15 million in debt in 2010, the day after we signed the note on that, the sky fell and property values plummeted double digits over the next 3 fiscal years. And what we thought was going to build an incremental revenue actually dropped in incremental revenue. And what that meant was we had a $15 million bond that we thought we'd have growth from to pay the debt coverage. That never happened. So first couple years that occurred, we kind of scrambled and we used gas monies to prop it up. When I was hired, Jim Williams and I kind of went to work on this with the commission's approval, and the concept there was to let's get the base year recalibrated so that when we ran out of gas money, that the debt didn't hit home to the general fund. So Jim was successful in getting that done. I think we're probably one of the very few CRAs in the state that got to recalibrate the baseline. So with that baseline, we got dropped, started anew in the CRA, and then we started seeing growth. So now we see the reverse trend of that. But we've been very cautious with the 44127 CRA. So basically, the only major expense in that CRA is the $1 million a year payment for that bond, which retires in 2036. We've had a couple little projects, whether it's been facade, sign, landscape money, or what have you. We've been very successful, but our growth rate now is about to a point where we're bringing in about the $1 million that covers the bond coverage. So if we keep squirreling that away, we may be at a spot where we get into, doggone it, we may be at a spot where we're into fiscal year 27 or 28 in the next couple years, but we'll have enough cash bank that we can retire that debt. And then if things continue to be positive, there could be $1 million a year for potential capital projects. In the interim, one of the big capital projects, I'll remind you again, I don't know if this really was well received last year, but I'll throw it back at you again. The biggest capital project that we have on the horizon in the 44127 CRA is our partnership with the FDOT to move those utilities and widen the road. I think that would be an allowable expense to improve that corridor, use CRA monies to take that expense away from some of our utilities that are just a little bit stressed right now. So those estimates to move water, move electric, move gas all add up to about $7.5 million. That's a big number. I don't know if you put that all in the CRA. I just throw that at you because our recommendation again is to continue to stockpile that cash, pay the debt, let that build. That's the
Perkins to Newell Hill.
Yes, Perkins to Newell Hill.
Yeah.
So that's the 44127 CRA. Discretionary sales tax. So now, as we talked about some other projects, we bring in about, is that an honest 3.1 million? So we bring in about $3.1 million in discretionary sales tax revenue. One thing that we haven't talked about is I think you will see this number start to increase as our population increases with the villages, and we calculate those numbers. So that's a good thing. So typically, here's where we have to spend discretionary sales tax money before we start spending it on fun stuff. $800,000 for police and fire lease payments. So all our police and fire vehicles are purchased. We pay the lease payment to the fleet fund with discretionary sales tax, an allowable expense. The second thing we do is we have some debt for the radios and the PD cameras that we pay for with the discretionary sales tax revenue. That's about $1 million. The next thing we do is we transfer over to the fleet fund to pay for debt. The next thing is after those three expenditures, there's about $1 million of monies, and we've kind of always talked about where we get capital monies from. So you have about every year $1 million of open capital improvement monies. So we're suggesting we've got $350,000 of projects that we'd like to recommend to you tonight, which leaves about $310,000 available. So the discussions tonight were improvements, and just to re-emphasize kind of the two restroom facilities that have been talked about this evening anyway, Corrine Williams Park and John L. Johnson Park. So the Corrine, and maybe I misspoke, because Corrine Williams was an overall park improvement, not just restrooms. So it was facilities, it was shade structures, it was upgrading the facilities. John L. Johnson was a restroom. So that's about the restroom number, folks. Just it happened. I don't make this up. It just, but that's about what we get. So that reserve number. The capital improvement projects, though, that we are recommending that we do need to take a look at as priority projects. We always reserve about $150,000 to fix roofs. The new one this year is security improvements. Post-COVID, and the world continues, unfortunately, to get better and stranger, to be optimistic. But we talked about in the past making security improvements where we're lacking security. Here at City Hall, next door, I always forget what we called it, LMSC. What does that stand for? Leesburg Municipal Service Center, LMSC. So that's where building, purchasing, IT, GIS, and planning and zoning is housed. City Hall and the Resource Center. We really do lack some security measures there. If you go to different cities in the region, and if you've been to the county admin building these days, everything is locked. You know, we try to, we want to work with the public, but we also want our employees to be safe. Those facilities we just rattled off, those 3 facilities, they're very open, and they lack some safety measures. I don't want to harp on those issues too much. The concept would be to secure the facilities to where we move to where doors are locked and you need the badge to get through the facilities. So City Hall, for example, would continue to be open to the public. You walk into the front door, you go to the entry receiving employee, I don't know the name for it, but that front carousel, you sign in, you get your pass. If you need to go to HR, you'd have a citizen pass where you hit the swipey, the door, the elevator opens and lets you up. For council meetings, we'd be able to unlock doors and elevators, but keep everything open so the public could get right to the city commission chambers easily. Finance department would have a swipey pass, so employees would have swipey passes, commissioners would, and members of the public. If you're here to pay your utility bill, that would be open. You go right in. The employees behind the area would be secured. Same type of concept in the local Leesburg Municipal Service Center. Dan's home, affectionately we call. Same type of issue there, where we make fuller that entry vestibule, so you can get in, you can get to building through the entry administrative assistant as well as planning and zoning, and the resource center as well. Same. And the rough estimate to get all that accomplished is about $175,000. Splash pad improvements, that's going to be about the life cycle on the splash pad. When we originally built the splash pad, we had the concrete surface. That was very unpopular. We had a couple of kids fall. I don't think we had major claims from it, but we immediately got the, hey, we change it, let's make it better. We eliminated that from the inception, so we put in the spongy blue cool stuff, but that does have a life cycle of about 5 years, and we've hit that life cycle. Changing it out is about $125,000. So I think you're going to see that as a recurring expense to keep the splash pad tip-shop shape. And then there was the concept to put the Corrine Williams Park improvements into the discretionary sales tax items versus the Carver Heights CRA, just to kind of spread the wealth. That leaves the 310 for other potential projects that the commission may want to see done that we didn't include. That 310 would not be an eligible expense for the $100,000 for the partnership. Cash from the CRA or any general revenue would be that. So just putting that out there. If you saw, that not an eligible expense, it's got to be a capital expense. Any questions or projects that we missed from the commission? This is a new chart we wanted to put together for you, kind of just a flavor of what we're working on. So, for example, when I said that like a trade-off with the partnership downtown CRA issue, there was some capital projects. Maybe we're busy. These are some of the projects we're working on. We still have that Market Street design concept that we talked about in the CRA. That's actually available for if you wanted to shift that around. We never went back to revisit that. We got to double check. So that could potentially be something you could deallocate and spread that money.
So that's the $320,000, not the $1 million.
Define.
Remember you were going to get me a number where when we talked about this. I thought there was $1 million allocated.
There's 321 that if you don't want to do the market project, that's the number you could deallocate.
So I thought there was $1 million.
That's where we talked about $1 million, but I think that was the ARP money. John L. Johnson Park improvements, that was the fence. That's what's left from the fence. So there's some scraps, here. I don't know, residuals that we can kind of trade around. So we've got some flexibility. The partnership building, we still got the $250 that we need to do to upgrade that facility. We've just gotten bogged down, again, supply issues, Wharton Smith being busy, so we just have struggled to get to that project. So it's still one. I don't think that's a project that the commission wants to do away with. The aquatic center and the monument sign are done, so there's about 26 grand left there. Rails to trail, the marina project is still one that's not available, but we're still working on that. Pat Thomas still has about 100 grand left that I think the baseball folks are talking about. I think the last I left this was the locker room discussion, so I need to report back to you on that. Sleepy Hollow and Susan, that's the rectangle field stuff. So that's still in there. So that's one we're working on. And then other available cash monies throughout the city, probably about $3.1 million where you can look to. I know the lighthouse project's been talked about. That's probably going to be on your desk in the next meeting or two. Other projects, again, that we haven't talked about. So what we haven't had allocated from the American Recovery Act is about 700 grand. We've got some interest revenues floating around. What's CR? Just general fund revenues that from projects that, shuffle the deck and put it all together is about $1 million sitting there. And then there's 1.3 in DST monies, which Brandy and I continue to argue about whether we want to call it loop or discretionary sales tax. Loop is local option something. It's the same. It's synonym. Loop is probably the right word for it. I've called it discretionary sales tax from earlier days. So if Brandy says loop and I say DST, we're saying the same thing. So there's about $3 million in other residual projects. So as we want to work through the rest of the summer, catch where we can catch it. So as we tighten this up, those are some of the revenue streams we'll look at. If you have other concepts or whatever that you don't think of immediately, just hit me up and we'll review it. Was that okay? Moving on to gas tax. So local option gas tax is the other special revenue that we have. We get about, that's the couple of thousands of pennies that you pay at the pump, and then this is our share of it. We get about $900,000 from that revenue source. All of that is transferred into the general fund. My hope is that we can start weaning that back as we see other growth, so that then we can shift from paving streets and fixing potholes, doing eligible expenses, but then start doing more repaving stuff. I don't see major needs with repaving. I know there's never not a need, but this process has worked. It's been good for the general fund. We've got it covered. We're using those. Pretty much 90% of that covers the street lights. Housing assistance program is the fund for the Miss Paul Simmons apartments, which is basically the rents and then the maintenance of the facilities. Debt service is really just a clearinghouse based on statutes where when you do capital projects and you pay debt, you take it from one pocket, you put it into the other, and you pay debt because you have to pay your debt out of the debt service fund. So it's really more of an accounting type of fund. These numbers we've already talked about this evening in different capacities, so there's not a lot to talk about. And then they're into the presentation. If there's no questions from the commission, I lied to Commissioner Reisman. He asked about grant funding. I thought tonight was the grant funding night. I was wrong. We'll talk about the grant funding being the civic programs, the cemetery and all the other ones. So we'll do some homework on that. We review that Thursday night. So we got you again Thursday night at 5:30. We finish off with the civic funding. If you want, do you want to do that at the top? It doesn't matter. Okay, so we'll start out with civic funding. Then we hit the rest of the enterprise funds: water, sewer, solid waste, airport, and then we've got the pension funds. They're all doing good, so that would go pretty quick. And then the internal service funds. We'll probably need to have a little bit of discussion on the health insurance fund and the workers' comp fund. I'll give you just the highlight reel of that is we kind of remember, if you remember last year, we propped up the health insurance fund because of claims with workers' compensation monies. This year, our health insurance claims did better, so I think we've got some stability there, but workers' comp didn't do as well. We talked about that in the general fund on Thursday, so we'll talk about that. And then the other one on there was the fleet fund, and the fleet fund kind of hangs in. So that's the highlight, that's the prelude to Thursday night. And then recapping tonight, we'll come back. We have the meeting with the Carver Heights group on Monday, and we'll talk about the different concepts on the John L. Johnson Park, the home grant, the police stuff, and the lighting. And just the other comment that came at speed bumps. And speed bumps, it was kind of one thing that we wanted to avoid. We can talk about that more next week. And we have the electric department working on some of the lighting issues. I thought we'd address some of the outages. They're taking a look at different light styles to prevent them from going out and these type of things. So we'll have a fuller report on those items on Monday next.
Any other comments from the commission?
May I speak, please?
Okay.
I hope that this does not sound preemptive or lighthearted, but my spirit and my soul aches that ache can be eased if we were to decide tonight as an honorary or a kind of honorary remembrance of John L. Johnson, that we would, in memory of him this evening, decide for sure that we are going to implement or construct the bathrooms at the park. There appears to be enough monies to make that decision if we had the will to do so, in memory of him and his historical, legendary life that he has lived here.
Yeah. I don't think that's a decision that we can make tonight without having more information for what it's going to cost, where the money will come from. There's a lot more goes into it than just deciding tonight. So my position is we need to put that.
Yeah, well, I think the fiscal year 24 budget so far has been is a good one. I think we've got some cool stuff in there. We've made some taxing changes and some big modifications, and so we're optimistic that there's a little something in there for everybody and is good, and we'll keep moving forward.
Any other comments?
Motion to adjourn.
We're adjourned.